Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Very, very happy to be here.
Gonzalo, you want the lights up?
Doesn't matter. Your choice. Your choice. I'm very happy to be here. Energized to be here. I feel like I'm completely in my function, especially when I'm here. I wake up realizing that I'm in my function. I wake up in the morning knowing we've only got one purpose and one function for being here. But coming here re-energizes that presence and remembering in a big way for me. So thank you for allowing me this space. Cindy had a question a moment ago, which is in perfect alignment with the topic tonight about lowering ourselves to rise above. This always happens. I always get, literally as I come on my way here, I always get inspiration to open the talk with, and it happened just moments before we started. So Cindy asked me about why don't we who attend spiritualist churches, this one or any other spiritualist church, why don't we bow down whenever Jesus' name is spoken? And I didn't have an answer myself personally, but I asked her, well, just to take it to Jesus himself and for clarity, and take all these important questions to the Holy Spirit and Jesus for clarity about what our customs mean and so on and so forth. But this idea of bowing our heads is a symbolic gesture of lowering ourselves, lowering our personal self, not in a self-debasing way or putting ourselves down or valuing ourselves less. That's not the point. The point more deeply, I feel, about bowing down is the lowering of the personal egoic identity, this personal self that in the world, in our culture, we want to stand out. Our whole life we're taught to stand out, be the best, seek attention, seek approval, get people to like you, especially in this day and age where it's about likes and followers. Get people to approve of you, get people to recognize you, be somebody. I always ask students when they come in the program, I was like, well, tell me, once you acquire everything you think you want, once you get money, a job, the diploma, apartment, car, once you get everything you think you want, then what? What's the feeling that you think you're going to feel that you can't feel right now? And invariably, they give me some version of, well, I just want to be somebody. So that idea of the personal self standing out has to be chopped down to the core. It has to be axed down to the roots for us to fully know our God-given self. If we truly identify with our God-given self that Jesus did want us to move toward and work toward and train our minds toward, then this personal self that needs to stand out, which is so important in our world to stand out, this personal identity that needs to stand out, that is so prized and upheld in our world, that needs to be completely chopped out. It needs to be lowered, it needs to be stamped out, and it needs to be constantly watched to make sure it doesn't take over our mind and our heart and our personality, which it has done pretty much our whole life, because that's our training in the world, is to stand out as a personal identity, to be the best as a personal self. And I feel very strongly, that was a perfect question, Cindy, so I'm so thankful that you asked that.
Well,
I feel,
you for answering.
I thank you. I feel very strongly that Jesus wants us very directly to be very vigilant of that personal self and all the thoughts that run during the day about taking care of my personal identity. In many cases, taking care of my personal self more than the other selves around me. We need to be constantly vigilant to not let that identity overtake us. And the way we do that is to turn to the other thought, turn the other cheek, as he teaches us, to turn to the other thought that he gives us, to turn to him and constantly ask for the light to be shown who we are. Constantly ask to be guided and led in everything we do, not just when we need help, not just when we're depressed and when we're down and out, but all day long, even when we're feeling happy during the day, to ask, Holy Spirit and Jesus, help me see this state of happiness the way you see it. And if we can train our minds and train our hearts, because it always goes back to mind training, it's not more complicated than that. It's not fancier than that. It always goes back to mind training, away from the personal thoughts that keep us imprisoned and keep us rolling and rolling about what if and what might all day long. And we need an other thought to train our minds toward that is above this world. Not the thoughts of the movie that's constantly going to turn and churn and trap us. That's going to continue. That doesn't go away. We don't fight that movie. We don't fight that cycle of thoughts, because we'll lose if we try to fight our thoughts and let me think positive and try to fight back against those thoughts, which many of us have tried. We're going to lose if we try to fight our thoughts. No, the ego's mind that runs that movie is insane, and we are going to go insane if we try to fight on a level of insanity. We have to rise above this level of insanity by trying to fix our thoughts and fix each other's thoughts, especially those other thoughts that make me uncomfortable, those other thoughts that cause me to judge and condemn others because they make me uncomfortable, and they cover over the fact that those judgments against others are the same judgments and faults that I hold against myself. You see the mess of insanity that this world has got us entrapped in. Look outward so we don't look inward, where the true source of our being and our state of joy lie. Look outward in the world where we get constantly distracted about who we need to pay attention to, what we need to pay attention, what we need to seek and desire and to obtain, as opposed to looking inward. You see the constant distraction. We're not going to fix that movie, but we can turn away from it and ask for the alternative thought to fixate on. And that alternative thought always comes from the Holy Spirit, from Jesus the Christ. But we have to ask for that to be brightened and shown and clarified to us. So that was a perfect question and a wonderful way to introduce this idea of lowering ourselves so we can rise above and truly know our God-given self. And we cannot know our God-given self messing around in our worldly self, trying to get approval in a world which is not designed to really approve of us temporarily. But we can't get permanent, full-time, lasting wholeness in our personal selves ever. That's why the vast majority of people in the world are not happy and are miserable and are depressed. And we pretty much spend our lives trying to cope and trying to make it by and trying to get by, and we don't really focus on this idea of, let me step into and practice and use my upset and use my darkness, use that for purposes to step through it to something greater, something more whole, something that truly God created in me, but I just can't see because of all of this worldly darkness, which I've learned to shackle myself to. So the idea of lowering our personal selves is an absolute requirement to get to our God-given wholeness. And that's why we're here. That's the only purpose that we have as we walk this earth with each other. I've been listening a lot to a guy named David Goggins, if any of you've heard about him. He's an inspirational speaker. Long story short, he does a lot of extreme physical feats, ultra distance running, and a lot of extreme adventure races, extra long different races. And I think a lot of people get hung up on these physical feats of his, and he's very raw in his expression. He curses a lot, and I think a lot of people get lost in the demeanor, but more deeply underneath all of the physical demonstration and his extreme sense of how he expresses himself in the physical. What I hear from him is that we have to constantly lower our physical, our egoic personal self to truly see our greatness. That our greatness as God created us cannot come by thinking that we can somehow achieve our way above others. Again, this goes completely against what we were taught in school, in family, in church, in pretty much every facet of our upbringing. We were taught to seek some sort of uplifting of our personal identity. And I feel he's teaching us in a very down-to-earth, simple way with some extreme physical demonstrations on a physical strength level, that we actually can lower ourselves through our physical struggles so we can truly see past our limitations. The reason he does a lot of the extreme races and so forth is underneath of it to show that we're not limited by the things that we've told ourselves our whole lives that we have to be limited by. That we're not boxed into these ideas that, well, I can only do so much, and I have all these conditions, so therefore I can only really do so much activity. So he uses these physical feats within athletic events and so forth, just for purposes of demonstration to see how strong and how capable our minds can be trained. Keyword, our minds can be trained. It doesn't happen like that. But underneath it all, what really matters is that we use our day-to-day physical struggles, because they're going to happen. We use our day-to-day struggles to train our minds with the Holy Spirit, with the Christ that's always around us and available to us, but we have to ask for it to be shown. We use our struggles as a way to train our minds to go beyond our struggles. So we use our darkness and our depression and our sadness. We don't deny it. Being spiritual does not mean faking being positive at all. Being truly, truly committed to a spiritual path means we accept and embrace all of the pain, all of it, and we don't run from it. And we constantly ask to be shown the source of that pain, which is in our minds and our hearts, because we've learned to identify with that pain somewhere in this crazy story called our lives on earth. So a truest, purest spiritual path absolutely has to have mind training at a core. I do not feel that mind training is often apart from a deeply spiritual path. It is actually absolutely essential to a deeply pure spiritual cleansing process, because it requires us to confront the junk that we don't want to look at. It requires us to confront the junk that we've learned here in our world of put up a good front to shove in the closets. All of our guilt, our shame, our insecurities, all the stuff that we don't want to talk about openly, all the stuff that we don't want to talk about openly that has weighed us down our whole lives, especially with people that we say we want to be close to. We don't feel we can talk about it. So we end up living a life that's so far and away and phony from our God-given truth that we have no clue who we really are. We have no inkling who our God-given self is, because we've been living on the track, the program of I should, as opposed to looking up and asking, what do I do? Show me the way. Show me the way. Holy Spirit, Jesus, don't help me deny this. Help me to walk through this and confront whatever darkness my mind is trying to play into me. So the idea of lowering our personal selves and our personal egoic identity gets us out of this comfort zone, which David Goggins speaks to very clearly about how we have a very strong tendency to stay in comfort zone, whether it's trying to avoid exercise because it makes me uncomfortable to go outside in the heat and deal with unpleasant conditions, whether it's changing my physical regimen, my diet, or something that I can do in a practical sense for my physical health. And then more deeply, our personal ego has a strong, inbuilt, ingrained tendency to avoid discomfort when it comes to being truthful, and when it comes to being open, and when it comes to being sincere, saying to our loved ones, people that we say we want to be close to, hey, this is how I feel. I'm being open and upfront with you. You don't have to like it, but this is how I feel. This is what's weighing me down. And I'm going to listen to what I'm guided to do, as opposed to continue to do what I should be doing as taught to me, as trained into me by my upbringing. I'm going to be genuine to the Spirit about what I'm driven to do, much more than what the winds of the world are blowing us in a direction to do, which has not resulted in our genuine happiness and our genuine joy if we're honest with ourselves. So this idea of gravitating toward comfort and staying in the comfort zone, repeating habits that have always brought us closed in, restricted, what we call a safe zone of being, and it's not allowed at all the light of God to come in and for us to walk through this very uncomfortable process called cleansing and called an evolution process. It is going to be uncomfortable. We cannot avoid, if we're going to grow and evolve, we have to go through discomfort, and quite a bit of it to shed some very heavy personal ego tendencies that we encrust ourselves with as we go through this earth life. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. I tell my partners, kids all the time, it's okay. Tell the students, it's okay to be uncomfortable. Discomfort is okay, because that lets us know that we're actually developing and we're evolving and we're training ourselves. But if we run the other way, away from discomfort, then we won't really know how far our minds and our hearts can go in truly knowing our God-given self. We won't know unless we allow ourselves to walk through these discomforts, which will come up on a daily basis for us. We have challenges all day long that we can allow and embrace and not run from, by just learning to train our minds and our hearts to look up and ask to be shown, hey, Holy Spirit, Jesus, show me the way. Walk me through this. Walk me through whatever it is, physical challenges, emotional challenges, relationship challenges, career challenges, all of them. If the Holy Spirit and Jesus' word is true and accurate, it must be true and accurate in all cases. There can't be exceptions to the Holy Spirit and Jesus' gospel if it doesn't work in all instances. Jesus and the Holy Spirit can't be truly, truly true if it can't be invoked with all effectiveness in all circumstances. And this is the thing, that a deep spiritual path is consistent. A deep spiritual path is pure. A deep spiritual path is simple and clear. My two favorite words, simple and clear. That means you can invoke the same practice and strategy and asking and pleading and petition and openness to be led. You can invoke that anytime you want to with sincerity and be led through whatever challenge and discomfort overtakes us. But it does take a lot of commitment and a lot of work and a lot of mind training to get us past this feeling that we need to be afraid of this discomfort that somehow keeps us boxed into this worldly character called the personal self, that I believe is Gonzalo, that must behave and act a certain way so people will like me and accept me, as opposed to walking through the discomfort of shedding that prison of an identity and truly knowing our God-given self as we were created. So I invite you in your spiritual path to, as you wake up in the morning, keep it very clear and simple that we're here for one purpose and one purpose only. The beautiful thing with God's purpose for us, it's simple, it's the same. Yours, mine, everybody's in the entire world, it's the same. There are no separate purposes. Yes, we have different talents, we have different characteristics, and we have different abilities, and those all can be used toward one purpose, but we need to ask, and we need to be willing to be shown the way. That's the difference, and that beautifully simplifies our existence, which here in the world can be terribly complicated and terribly a mess, but the Holy Spirit and Jesus has our back. But we need to ask. We need to ask to clear it all up. And I'll leave you with these 3 points that are coming very strong now. Mindful self-compassion. No matter what comes up, no matter what yucky, dark, heavy feelings come up in our minds and hearts during the day as we go through the day, remember to embrace it all. Embrace it all. Don't kick ourselves and criticize ourselves for anything, regardless of what comes up in our mind and heart. We're so used to censoring our thoughts, and that's what keeps us imprisoned by our thoughts. I implore of you to be very mindful in self-compassion toward ourselves. Every single thought and feeling that comes up, to embrace it, because shoving it away will make it more powerful. Mindful self-compassion. Make that part of our daily mind training practice. And 2, avoiding taking sides. Taking sides encourages us to be judgmental and condemning toward our brothers and sisters that make us uncomfortable for whatever reason. And that tendency to judge and look outward at other people's faults is precisely what covers over our ability to look within. At the same judgments that I hold out here, I'm actually feeling about my own self if I chose to look and ask to be shown deeper. And the judgment outward, the tendency in our world, especially to be so quick to judge and condemn and put people down to elevate ourselves, that personal self, is covered over because those judgments keep us away and distracted from our God-given self buried within, that we have to ask for those judgments to be examined within ourselves. And we can only do that with the Holy Spirit, the Christ, but we have to ask. And on that same note of avoiding taking sides, again, lowering our personal self, the judgments that we hold out here in the world can only be allayed and illuminated if we lower our personal self. So speaking of bowing to, which Cindy was asking me about, I invite everybody as they go through the day. The bowing, the physical bowing, is a beautiful gesture. More deeply, what matters is in our mind and our heart that we bow down. Not only to Jesus, the Christ, the Almighty, but we bow down to all of his children and all of his creation. And I mean all day long, especially the brothers and sisters that we don't want to bow down to, the brothers and sisters that we want to hold ourselves above, the brothers and sisters that we want to shove down and put beneath us because we don't think they're worthy of bowing down to. Bow down to them in our mind and our heart. Check our judgment, check our condemnation all day long, because at the end of the day, all of those judgments and condemnations are against this dude right here in the mirror that we're all looking at when we get up in the morning. That's where the judgment and the condemnation really is against, buried under whole mounds of self-hatred. And we can only really examine that ugliness within if we check and constantly are aware of how we judge and condemn and attempt to put our personal selves above others during the day. So constantly be aware of that, and I invite you to make a constant practice and train our minds to bow down and lower our personal self all day long in your mind training, in your spiritual practice, and help simplify our purpose in our walk for being here with each other. I appreciate everybody for coming. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Acknowledge yourself for being here tonight. Thank you so much.